stage with like 4 guys in suits, and he had this really vibrant like shirt with a unicorn on it. And I don't have a unicorn, but I did have like this thing. So hopefully that's close enough. But I was inspired, so I dressed colorfully today. And so I'm here to give an introductory presentation on Saya. I cut out like a lot of the really heavy details because I figured that I'd make a shorter presentation, and then I'd just pass it to the crowd for questions. I see a lot of familiar faces. So if you are already pretty familiar with Saya, I'm actually going to ask you not to ask any questions. The floor open to people who are not as familiar with it. So yeah, with that said, we'll get started. So Saya is a decentralized cloud storage platform. It is not based on Ethereum. It's its own blockchain. But our goal is much the same as Ethereum, which is to decentralize things. And when I say decentralized, what I really mean is that we want to make use of things like the cloud and the internet and this like open, always online infrastructure without having to give control over to someone else, someone who can, turn off our site or turn off our app or ban us or whatever. And so we can have control of the services and the tools that we're using. And so we're doing that at Saya with the cloud. You can put your data into, I guess, like a decentralized Dropbox. And then there's no Dropbox, including our company. If we shut down, the service still runs. If the FBI comes to us and asks us to take down files, we can kind of help, but we can't shut down files. We can only sort of point to who maybe uploaded them. But other than that, we try to keep it as decentralized as possible. So decentralized. We also think that we have a superior cloud. So our prices are 90% cheaper than a traditional cloud network. Our speeds, our throughput is, right now it goes somewhere around 300 megabits per second. That's upload and download. And I think that in the future we'll be able to push it 5 or 10 times as fast. We claim that we could deliver content to any city in under 50 milliseconds, which is something that Amazon would struggle with. And then the biggest thing would be no downtime. S3 has downtime every now and then and makes the news every single time, and like half the internet goes down and people can't turn on their lights. So we can get around a lot of that with a more decentralized architecture. And then further, we can have redundancy that is able to survive disaster events. Think like Russia launching a bunch of nukes to the U.S. or like a meteor strike coming and destroying Los Angeles or something, or San Francisco. So your data is all over the world, and so unless Russia nukes every single continent, you should be okay. And we can do all this while allowing people to maintain full control. So how do we do this? The biggest strategy is to make it an open marketplace. So today's cloud, you have like 4 competitors. It's like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and I think like Dell. And if you're not one of those 4 people, no one's ever going to use your service. And it doesn't matter how good you are, how reliable you are, how impressive your engineers are. If you don't have that name that people recognize, no one's going to use your service, which means the competition is relatively like relaxed, and all the big companies can focus on distinguishing on features instead of price or other like cutthroat techniques. So we want to create an open marketplace where if you have storage, it doesn't matter how big you are or how good you are, you can put it on the marketplace, and if it's sufficiently good, you'll see usage. And this is like the primary pressure that drives our network to be faster, that drives it to be cheaper, is that if someone comes along who's better than you, then like that's it for you. You either have to compete with them, or you have to leave the network. Then of course we use encryption to protect user privacy. We use file contracts to incentivize the host to stick around and hold on to your data, which is a problem in a lot of traditional peer-to-peer file storage networks. Then finally, we use something called Reed-Solomon coding, which I'm going to dive into a little bit, to make sure that things stay redundant. So our blockchain is a custom home-built blockchain. It's written in Golang, which is Google's programming language. It's like I think 5 years old at this point. We are a proof of work based blockchain. We use Blake 2B, which is ASIC friendly, and we have ASICs in production for our blockchain, and I can defend that later. I think there are extremely good reasons to be using an ASIC blockchain, and I'm happy to articulate. We have a 2 megabyte block size limit. Honestly, if I could go back and change that, I'd bring it down to 1. I think the community would not be happy if we tried to do that now, though, so we're going to leave it at 2. 10 minutes per block, just like Bitcoin. And then, yeah, 30 billion coins in circulation today, 170,000 new coins generated every block. If that seems like a lot, it's because I wanted users to feel like they had, if you have like $5 or $10 of storage, I want it to be like a couple hundred coins. It's just more fun. So yeah, no like practical reason for that. Cool. All right, so I'm going to talk through the file contract now. So the most important thing about our file contract that I haven't seen on any other network is that when you create a file contract on the Cyan network, the renter puts up money and that like goes into escrow, but the host also puts up money that goes into escrow. So what this means is that if the host loses the data, the host also loses the money that they put in. So if you come and offer your storage to the Cyan network and then you leave without fulfilling your commitment, you're going to actually be like out money. You're not just losing revenue, you're losing like actual dollars that you put into the system, or Cyan coins rather, that you put into the system. And this really helps our churn. I mentioned earlier, but a lot of networks, peer-to-peer networks, suffer high churn, and that has prevented them from hitting, I think, more like mainstream or more widespread use. Is because they couldn't handle the churn of their systems. And so we have this collateral system that really disincentivizes churn, also protects things against things like currency price fluctuations. And then the host, the renter pays all the money up front, which means the host is 100% confident that they will get paid. So if the renter disappears and is never heard from again, the host will still get paid. So the host, this is a trustless environment where the host can be confident that once the deal is done, there's like a carrot at the end of the tunnel, and they aren't dependent on the renter in any way, even though they can't access the money for like 3 or 4 months. Cool. Redundancy. This is probably the most important part of our network, technically speaking. When you put your data on some random host, how do you know that they're not going to leave? And we have the collateral, so you know that they have a strong incentive not to leave. But still, hosts leave, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. There's no proof that you can provide that's like, yes, this host is guaranteed to stick around. Nothing stops that host from just pulling the plug. And no cryptography can ever get in the way of that. So we defend against the host unplugging problem by putting our files on a bunch of machines. And as it were, we use 30 in production today. We're slowly upping that number over time. I think by like 2020, when the software hits like full maturity, we're going to be looking at storing data on 96 hosts. And we use something called Reed-Solomon coding. So Reed-Solomon coding is like this really old magical algorithm. It was made in 1960. And it's used in CDs, it's used in Wi-Fi, and not a lot of people have heard about it. But basically, when you can take a file and you can split it up into 30 pieces, and you can say 10 out of 30 pieces are required to restore the original file. And any 10 pieces will do. So it doesn't matter which 10 you get, as long as it's 10 different pieces. And then further, the overhead of doing this is only 3x. So it's the same penalty as doing a 1 of 3 scheme, just storing triple replication. But instead of 3 points of failure, you have 30 points, and you can survive up to 20 failures. And so if you run the probability numbers, if we have a 1 in 3 scheme, that's 3x overhead. And we'll just assume, to make the numbers clean, that hosts are 90% reliable. Files are gone. Are the chances, so there's a 10% chance that a host disappears. So the chance that you lose your files in a 1 of 3 is the chance that all 3 hosts disappear. That's going to be 1 in 1,000. So you have a 0.1% chance of losing your file in a 1 of 3 scheme with 90% reliability. But in a 10 of 30 scheme, which is the same overhead, you have a 1 in 1 quintillion That's 15 zeros chance of losing the file. And intuitively, the reason that is because in the first scheme, all we needed was 3 rare events to lose our file, and 3 rare events happen 1 in 1,000 times. But in the second scheme, we need 21 rare events to happen before we lose the file. And even though there are 30 potential disasters instead of 3, it's extremely unlikely that you have 21 rare events in a row. So that gives us our excellent probabilities. So the grand plan with Saya is to replace all storage infrastructure in the world. And we're so we're mostly targeting services like Dropbox, like Netflix, like CERN. There are a lot of companies out there that either have giant data centers or have giant AWS bills or have just big like raw infrastructure bills. And we're really focused on making their lives easier, replacing their infrastructure, giving them faster, better, more reliable, cheaper things to work with. And then we'll let them worry about getting to the user. So in the example of like Box.com, Box makes a storage solution and then sells it. We make the infrastructure that we sell to the solution provider instead of selling a storage solution ourselves. So I mentioned earlier decentralized Dropbox. That's not quite actually what we're going for. We're trying to build an infrastructure that a Dropbox would use. And then of course, we're excited if anyone wants to build a decentralized Dropbox on top of us. That's you. You should get in touch and we can help you out. But yeah, so I think that is, oh, okay. One more slide. So Saya today, we have on our network today about 800 hosts. We have about 3,000 terabytes or 3 petabytes of data on the network. Storage, I say that it's $2 a terabyte per month because I think that's the sustainable price. On our network today, it's more like 40 cents per terabyte per month. But I don't see how that's sustainable. So I give the higher number. And then bandwidth is $1 per terabyte compared to 92 for Amazon. I think Akamai is like 50. And most other services are more expensive by like, a factor of 50 or more. And then finally, we have a full-featured API, which is really like what we care about. Catering to developers, catering to companies who use the other APIs that are out there. And our client is fully open source. Aha, all right, now we're at the end.
Why do you think that's economically sustainable?
$2 per terabyte per month.
If it's so much cheaper than the competition, they also compete with.
Yeah, so we do a lot of things that make the lives of our hosts easier than the lives for Amazon. And like one of the big ones is that we only require 95% uptime. And so if you think, that's something that you can actually get from home or a data center can get with a single ISP and a single power company, right? If you're running a data center and your controller node goes down and your whole data center goes offline, if you're Amazon, that's like totally unacceptable. You have to have all these techniques for working around your central node failing. But if you're a Saya host and your central node fails, then and then it takes 6 hours or 8 hours to bring back online, and then you're well within your 95% uptime bound. So we're actually okay with our hosts going offline for hours at a time, or even like a full day at a time, because we have 30 of them. We only need 10. That makes.
Amazon could do the same thing. They could use a more decentralized approach. They could use a read-solid coding. So why don't they do?
I think that it's a momentum thing. I think you get a lot of benefits from having giant data centers. For example, they get the whole EC2 stuff that is not, Saya doesn't have like a compute platform. It's just storing data and transferring data. But how we arrive at the $2 per terabyte per month specifically is we look at the price of, and this is all on consumer hardware. So if you're a professional and going out and getting economy of scale prices, you might do better. But we looked at the price of buying a bunch of hard drives. So if you want to buy like 800 terabytes of consumer drives off of Newegg, how much is that going to cost? How much is it going to cost to put somewhere with a good internet connection? How much is that internet connection going to cost? How much are the racks going to cost? How often are they going to fail? What's your electricity going to be? And on 50 hard drives is actually not that much. I think 50 hard drives draws as much power as like 1/10 of one Bitcoin miner. So it's not bad. And then we added all that up, and we're like, okay, these drives last for 4 years each, these other whatever, and it came out to about $2 per terabyte per month is what you'd have to charge to make about as much money as the wind. I don't know why I picked the wind industry, but it just seemed like a high capex industry. And so at $2 a terabyte per month, if you're doing things efficiently, you'll have the same profits as the wind industry would.
Roughly how much?
So I think it was 20% per year on your base investment.
So how much open capacity is out there?
So I'm not sure. I think it's more than a lot of people expect, and then less than a lot of other people expect. I think that it would be somewhere in the like millions of terabytes, if I had to guess. And when I say available, I mean like reasonably likely to be moved onto a network like SIA. So I'm not counting drives on old laptops that no one would ever power on. I'm talking about data locked up in data centers that just never got used, or hard drives that got decommissioned because they weren't worth it anymore. And the reason I estimate that is just based on the conversations I've had with people looking to jump on the SIA network. I know of probably 10,000 terabytes, and then I assume that I've only talked to a small fraction of people who have opportunities like this. I know that our network has 3,000 terabytes live today. I know that there's probably another 10,000 that's ready to go. And if our demand, like if we had enough money being paid into the network for it to make sense for them to plug in, they would, but it doesn't, so they're just unplugged. But a million terabytes falls like far short of total global demand. And so I think in the long run, like we get this like short-term boost or the short-term start, taking advantage of all the free hard drives out there, and we'll be able to ride that curve, I think, for probably 3 or 4 years. But then at some point, we're gonna reach a scale where we're gonna have to pay for, like the network has to pay for buying new hardware and installing new hardware and actual deprecation costs and whatnot. So I think we will run out of that like relatively soon in the life of SIA, and then eventually close to 100% of the network will be just like Bitcoin mining. It's not people's unused CPUs. It's dedicated hardware machines, and so we're expecting to move the same direction. Black coat.
I have 2 questions. So the first one, how does the value of the SIA coin itself, the actual agent, have any influence on the cost to do the SIA network? That's the first one. The second one is about what if someone for some people company? What about the people issue for SIA?
Yeah. So to take the first question, which was, how does the fluctuating price of SIA coin impact the price of storage on our network? And the answer is that hosts have the full freedom to set their own prices. That's part of our competitive network. And it's also a recognition that all storage is not equal. So for example, if you are on a data center line that's right next to San Francisco versus on a data center line that's in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, if Alaska even has data center lines, one node is going to be worth more than the other. So we let hosts pick their own price, and consequentially, as the price of SIA coin moves around, hosts are able to adjust their prices alongside it. So when the price of SIA coin went up, earlier this summer, we saw it took about a month actually, but after 4 to 6 weeks, hosts started adjusting their prices back down because the ones that didn't adjust were no longer competing with the ones who did. And so there was this big pressure that eventually came in that forced all the prices back down. So yeah, we expect the price of storage on the network to remain largely independent of the price of the SIA coin. To answer his second question, which was evil files. So the best that we can do with evil files is to stress that SIA is not an anonymous network. And so if you put evil files online that get like, say, the FBI's attention or Hollywood Industries' attention, and they come to us and they ask what we can do, we can probably poke the logs of the hosts. We can probably figure out who you are. We can look at the blockchain and the balance history. We can figure out who you are and what you uploaded. It's really difficult to take files off the network, but at the very least, hosts could start blacklisting those files, and then, yeah, we can probably figure out who you are. So we advise against it. But
What's the company's relationship to the network?
yeah, so the company's name is actually Nebulous, and our relationship is primarily as the builders of the network. And so we will introduce upgrades. Saya is entirely a software product, and we don't run any servers. That's not strictly true. We run a few servers, and what those servers do is feed like the Explorer, it feeds our website. There are some Bootstrap nodes, but a lot of our Bootstrap nodes are community nodes. And so if we were to tomorrow unplug all of our servers, most of the community probably wouldn't even notice. You would still be able to upload and download files. The Explorer would be gone, our website would be gone, and I guess people would get worried. But from a utility perspective, the Saya network would continue running. So we write upgrades, we make the software faster, we make it more scalable, and then we present them to the community. Community's option to update or decide to not update.
I'm curious about if there's a period of what's the word, like consolidation in the market, and imagine that you acquire another decentralized storage platform. How might you go about migrating the data from there onto Saya?
We would have to figure that out. I feel like it would probably depend on each storage platform. And it might even be as simple as just getting the hosts to switch over, maybe running some software that restructures the files to make sense on either network. But
or maybe you could offer some kind of like almost like a buyback or some incentive for them with the coin, maybe.
yeah, I think that coin mergers are, if they ever happen, are going to be really interesting. It sounds like a much worse headache than a company merger. So you got all the users who are like, oh no, my coins are worth more money than you paid for them, and I don't know. So yeah, this sounds like a nightmare.
Who can sign up to be a storage host?
Yep, so anyone can sign up to be a storage host. You can go and download our app, and then we have a tutorial that we recommend for serious hosts. The hosting game involves a little bit of knowledge just about how much data you're expected to provide, how much uptime you're expected to have. And then there are a couple other like silly mistakes that you're just expected to avoid, because if you don't, you like hurt the network and you hurt the quality of service. And so if you don't avoid those silly mistakes, which like if you don't read the guides, you might not recognize, then your score is going to be really low. But once you read all those guides, anyone can set up, anyone can run a host on the network. We have like 800, and it's nothing too special. You do need money to put up collateral though. So we recommend like 5 USD, somewhere between 1 USD and 5 USD per terabyte that you offer, that you have on reserve as collateral.
How does Nebulous make money?
Oh yeah, okay, so we have a pretty unique situation in the crypto space where we baked into the blockchain protocol our revenue stream. So when you create a file contract, the renter puts money in, the host puts money in, and then 3.9% of that whole package gets distributed to this asset called the Saya Fund, of which we own the vast majority. So when you're using storage on our network, even though it's decentralized, we're getting paid to build it. And a common question is, what happens if someone hard forks out the fee, which it wouldn't be a hard fork, the blockchain requires that you pay the fee. And our answer is that we just have to make sure that we're worth the 3.9% that we're charging. Because if we ever become like deadbeat developers or whatever, then yeah, let's see what would stop you. What would stop you? But today, I think pretty much everyone on the Saya network agrees that we've earned our cut, and so they're happy paying it.
So when the money's locked up in the contract, how long is that contract usually?
Yeah, so the contract actually lets you choose how long the money gets locked up. And typically, it's locked up for 12 weeks.
So does that mean, to his question earlier, if those funds that were locked up had a price drop, you probably can't alter the price for storage in the contract, right?
Yes, so the host is exposed to about 12 weeks of price fluctuations. And Our proposed solution to that is that larger hosts who maybe can't afford to be exposed to that can get futures contracts with exchanges or other other situations like farmers do with crops, and they insure against certain events outside of their control, and they isolate themselves from chance, I guess. In the back.
So you said we order required service to be up, supposed to be applied at some time. The difference to be up versus actually having the data, how do you check that they have the data contract before the contract expires?
Yeah, so as a renter, you can just infrequently download a random piece of data from the host. Because the host doesn't know which piece of data you're selecting, it's very easy to feel confident after doing that the host has all the data, or at least that they pass like 50 checks or whatever. They have most of the data. If a host starts failing these checks or is not meeting your latency requirements or is just in general being a bad host, the best you can do is downmark their score in your database and then never use them again. And so a host who is not performing to spec is going to lose customers quickly and is not going to be a sustainable long-term host. And so this does mean that there is some opportunity for some short-term abuse. However, we partially protect against that by requiring hosts to rinse the network. Whoa. All right, I'm going to keep going in the back.
Do you provide any quality of service metrics to the host saying, like, why is the host down or how is the host not performing up to the mark?
Can someone closer repeat the question?
Do you provide any quality of service metrics to the host operator that says why is the host not performing according to the whoever is renting the host?
So the question is,
Feedback.
do we give the quality of service metrics back to the host?
Right, or whoever is operating the host to say why is the host not doing very well?
Yes, so right now, the best that you can do as a host is either run your own node, or there are a couple of explorers, not us maintained, but community maintained explorers that will give the scores of all the hosts. And of course, it's not like super reliable because one, you have to trust that their scores are honest, but two, if they're in Ireland and most of your users are in the US or something, then the metrics may be off for the explorer. But generally speaking, we don't, and this is for renters too, we don't trust feedback about quality of service from anybody but ourselves. Anything that we didn't measure, we don't trust because we don't have a good way of knowing whether it's a good actor or a bad actor that is providing that feedback. And so that's an open problem in decentralization. And I think closely related to just the general problem of reputation. So yeah, we don't have a solution for that at this time. Okay, I think we're gonna do 2 more questions.
How is the difference in file?
So I'm just gonna leave it at, it's got all the things that you saw today, and Filecoin remains a white paper. And then I think, until Filecoin has a real network, I don't think that it's worth comparing against. All right, one more question.
So you said it's ASIC friendly.
Okay.
And can we more? You said there's ASICs in production. Are those like custom acceleration ASICs, or are these just their scope is open?
So we have in production we have a subsidiary of Nebulous called Obelisk. Obelisk is making the first, to the best of my knowledge, the first full custom ASIC for like 2B mining. They're a lot faster and a lot more power efficient. I can't give, because the FTC would get mad, but I can't give the exact specs that we're expecting. But I can say it's much faster, like 2 orders of magnitude faster. I can confidently say it's at least that fast versus a GPU. And they should be shipping hopefully in June of 2018. So it's some time away, but they will be hopefully very impressive. Why we picked ASICs is there's a blog post that we have. So if you just pick, if you Google Saya why ASICs. That will probably pull up the blog post. But just to one brief point is that every network has ASICs, even if you think that you are a GPU network. You actually have ASICs. I'll take Ethereum for an example. So actually, we're going to start with Bitcoin. In Bitcoin, if you want to mine Bitcoin at competitive efficiency, there are 2 chips that you can use. There's the Bitmain chip, there's the Bitfury chip. And if we're lucky, there will be a Japanese chip available soon. And if we're super lucky, there'll be a US chip available soon too. But those 2 are in production. When I say soon, I mean like 12 to 18 months. So not that soon. But you have 2 chips that you can use. And if you don't have those 2 chips, you're just out of the game. So that's kind of a sour situation. Now, if we move over to Ethereum, if you want to mine Ethereum competitively, there's 1 chip that you have to use, and that's the 1080 Ti. If you can't get 1080 Ti's, you can't mine in Ethereum. And I think NVIDIA is actually optimizing their chip so that, like, the 1080 Ti right now has use in like graphics and stuff, so non-crypto people have one. But I think NVIDIA is making cards that are optimized for cryptocurrency mining, which don't have things like HDMI ports and and video ports. They're all displayless, which means that only cryptocurrency people are going to have those chips. And you've actually come back to the same situation where Bitcoin was, or I guess actually never was, where you have exactly 1 chip that you can compete with. It's controlled by 1 company called NVIDIA. And that's a bad thing for decentralization. And it just strikes me as weird that, GPU mining proponents don't realize this. And then the other thing is that if you want to make a competitive chip to NVIDIA's 1080 Ti, you have to spend, I don't know, it's probably upwards of $300 million. If you want to make a competitive chip to Bitmain's chip, it's somewhere around $20 million. So it's not like I can just go do it. But 20 million is smaller than 300 million by quite a bit. Tezos can do one and not the other. Okay, thank you very much.
And thanks again to WorkFire for hosting us tonight. It's a great space. Thanks everyone for coming. We have about half an hour to hang out and chat. And then if everyone can start filtering over to the field for food and drinks.